بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونشكره على نعمائه ونتوب إليه من سيئات أعمالنا ثم الصلاة والسلام على حبيب إله العالمين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله المعصومين المطهرين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Sisters and brothers, my dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our second program for the month of Ramadan 2023. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the insight to be able to benefit from the fasting of this month the way we should. It's a holy month, and it would be a tragedy for us not to benefit from it properly. بسم الله يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض. Tell them, O Prophet, who is the one who responds to the helpless persons when they invoke and pray to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and removes their distress, and who makes them vicegerent on earth. Surah Nahl, verse number 62. Yesterday in our first program, I pointed out that the crux or the central theme of our conversation during the month will be around a probe into the famous dua, the well-known dua of Abu Hamzeh al-Thumali. And it's a celebrated supplication that presents numerous themes and concepts within it. I began yesterday by giving a brief bio of the life of the narrator himself, Thabit ibn Dinar, also known as Abu Ḥamzah al-Thumali, a well-known scholar of Kufi descent and ascetic figure and muhaddith. He narrates ahadith from different imams, particularly from the fourth Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wassalam. Two of his famous narrations are the Du'a Abu Hamzeh al-Thumali, which is the center of discussion for us, and also the treatise of right, Risalat al-Huquq, that is narrated from Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wassalam. Before I entered into the conversation, I focused on a central theme for our discussion, which constitutes the foundation of any, not only the Du'a Abu Hamzeh al-Thumali, but any conversation, anything about du'as and supplication. And that is the concept of du'a in our literature. I pointed out that we can see in our literature, both in the scriptural part, which is the Holy Quran, as well as a hadith that we have, huge space given to the concept of dua. The Holy Quran in particular not only commands us to benefit and make use of this powerful tool that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, handed to us as human beings, and to be able to communicate with Allah, the most beloved, the most merciful. In some instances, we have verses of the Holy Quran in which people are admonished and criticized when they shy away from the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala due to ignorance and arrogance. قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاؤُكُمْ. This is in Surah Al-Furqan, verse number 77, one of such admonishment that tell them, O Prophet, why should my Lord care about you if you will not invoke him in dua and prayer? The passage that I began at the beginning, أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ, it is a well-known passage in Surah An-Nahl 62, which is recited by people who are distressed and they have huge difficulties and they want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve them of those difficulties. There are khatm of Amman Yujib. If people pay attention, whenever somebody is sick or ill, at the end of prayers they would ask everybody to recite 5 times Amman Yujib, specifically for a particular purpose, whether that is the shafa of marda or the blessing to the soul of a deceased, or etc. etc. In addition to the verses of the Holy Quran that contains encouragement, command, and sometimes admonition and criticism when we don't use this powerful tool, I also pointed out to a number of verses yesterday in my conversation where the holy prophets, many holy prophets, starting from Prophet Adam alayhi salatu wassalam, until down, particularly we had examples of Prophet Ibrahim in various capacities was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prophet Yaqub was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Job was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yunus was asking. Musa was asking. Nuh was asking, and others. So we have prophets that they constantly remain in communication with Allah. We had also Zakaria, for example, when he wanted a child, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant him a child, and that was Yahya. So these examples were given. Now I want, before we get into the dua itself, finally one more introduction, and that is the number of ahadith that we have regarding the importance or the significance or the impact that dua could have in our life. Number one, hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah salam alayhi, alaykum bid-du'a فإنكم لا تقربون بمثله ولا تتركوا صغيرة لصغرها لأن صاحب الصغار هو صاحب الكبار. I advise you to supplicate, for nothing gets you closer to God than prayer, supplication and dua. Do not abandon dua for small things being trivial. Well, it's a small thing, I'm not going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the hand that grants the big request also grants you the small one. So always be encouraged and motivated to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for no matter what. There is a hadith narrated by some mystical figures. I have not been able so far to find out the source, that says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the abd, the servant, to ask him in a state of utter servitude and dependency on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to ask him for everything, even the hay for his camel or horses or anything else, even those small things, clearly stating that the abd or the servant does not possess anything, and everything that we have is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is another hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi, which says, أنا الضامن لمن لا يهجس في قلبه إلا الرضا أن يدعو الله فيستجاب له. I guarantee that God would grant the petition or the supplication of the one that whose heart rests solely on God's satisfaction. When ikhlas comes into the heart and the heart is purified of any strange material that might not work with the concept of the divine, that once it's cleansed up, then every dua will be accepted. Sometimes we have in our ahadith specific times are identified for the prayers, that the prayers are more acceptable. We have a hadith from Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salatu wassalam, particularly during the month of Ramadan. دعوة الصائم تستجاب عند إفطاره. The person who is fasting, at the time of breaking of the fast, any prayer that they may have, it will be acceptable, or will be rewarded and will be answered. I have heard from mystical figures, scholars of the field, that they said during the month of Ramadan, because we are guests on the Ma'idah, and the feast that Allah has provided for us, and guests are normally granted certain privileges. At the time of iftar, take the food, close it to your mouth, and put it down 3 times, and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, "Oh Lord, I'm your guest. I'm not going to eat until you grant me my wishes." It's based on this دعوة الصائم تستجاب عند إفطاره. Another issue or concept that again we see it repeatedly in our ahadith, the concept of Salat al-Layl, and how Salat al-Layl would help provide and resolve some of the issues. The Holy Prophet ﷺ, Salatul Layl mardatun lirrab. When you offer late night prayers, nightly vigils, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be accepted. Wa ijabatun lid-du'a. Whatever prayer during your supplications you may have during Salatul Layl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to grant you. Wa qabulun lil-a'mal wa barakatun fil-rizq. So Salatul Layl brings about God's satisfaction, granting of dua, acceptance of deeds, blessing in sustenance. These are all as a consequence of Salatul Layl. Another dua from the Holy Prophet, اغتنموا الدعاء عند الرقة فإنها رحمة. Once the heart is softened, and this is unique again for either Salatul Layl or during the month of Ramadan, late afternoon, after a lengthy period of fasting. As we get to the afternoon, the heart begins to soften up, and during this softening up of the heart, the du'as are اغتنموا الفرص, that this is the best opportunity for us to offer our prayers or supplications and dua. And many other narrations from our Imams clearly establish. Now, let us return to Du'a Abu Hamzeh al-Thumali and start with it. What comes across from this dua when we read it is the need for utter poverty that must be expressed, and servitude that must be expressed by abd and the servant before in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you detect this from the first sentence with this dua. Ilahi la tu'addibni bi'uqubatik. O Lord, don't correct me with your punishment. Now, adab in Arabic language, loosely defined as etiquette or some kind of correction. But we need to explain this. Humans, because of their free will, they are vulnerable and at risk to going astray and moving away from the right path. So they constantly need guidance and attention. Inna hadaynahu as-sabil imma shakiran wa imma kafura is part of this concept, that because humans need that guidance. Otherwise, if we don't pay attention, we drift to the point that Quran puts us in a state that Surah Al-Hashr, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Surah Al-Hashr, verse number 16. Don't be like those that forgot about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They became so disobedient that concept of God, divine and God consciousness no longer was present in their life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them forget themselves. And there is another verse in the Holy Quran, similar in the context. It says, استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله. That when shaitan takes over in full control like a mold, then we don't remember the concept of the divine, and remembering God, being God conscious, etc., are no longer an issue that we care about. So adab in this context is asking Allah. Imam is teaching us to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to correct us and to guide us to the right path, grab our hand and guide us to the right path, literally or metaphorically speaking. The concept of adab, as in one of the ahadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi, metaphorically used as an attire, a new attire, a person who has adab and practices positive trait on a regular basis is like wearing a new attire on every day. And this concept of adab to mean positive attribute reflected in another hadith from Imam Jawad alayhi salatu wassalam, حقيقة الأدب اجتماع خصال الخير وتجافي خصال الشر. The essence of adab, the essence of etiquette, the essence of correction is when all the positive traits are accumulated together, and we stay away from the negative traits. Khaja Abdullah Ansari in one of his books defines adab to be protecting the limit of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or understanding the limit of al-hafidhuna li hududillah, that to understand the limit where we should not transgress. There is a hadith about this particular issue that says where Allah should not see you where He doesn't want to see you, and Allah should see you where He wants to see you. So this concept of adab as the essence, the culmination of the positive trait and staying away from negative trait is this is something that Imam Zain al-Abidin salawatullah salam alayhi here is speaking about. So is teaching us, Imam Zain al-Abidin, to ask Allah to correct our behavior, but not through punishment. Ilahi la tu'addibni bi'uqubatik. Don't use punishment as a method to correct me, to remind me, to bring me back to the right path. Which leads us to the question that we need to ask. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala corrects or reminds a person or an abd or a servant when they go astray. The concept of ni'mah and niqmah is being used repeatedly by mystical figures. And we have a number of verses in the Holy Quran that we will be tested regularly with all the things around us, tested with our wealth, tested with our health, tested with our family, tested with our children, etc., etc. So all of these are part of the test with niqmah, the configuration of niqmah and ni'mah. In Surah Al-Fajr, there are two ayahs that clearly underscores this point. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ إِذَا مَبْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ. In this context, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses ni'mah and granting of ni'mah and bounties as a test. As for humans, when the Lord tests them with bounties, they become boastful and arrogant, and they say, "Oh, God has honored me." So ni'mah becoming the source of test is one of them. وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَبْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ. But if the Lord tests them with limiting their provision, then they become despondent, resentful. Oh, my Lord has disgraced me because he has not honored me by bounties, etc., etc. So Imam here doesn't say, don't oh Lord, don't guide me, or don't correct me. Imam says, correct me, but don't use punishment as a way of correction. Humans need correction for sure, because of the fact that we go astray and we go outside the right path. But Imam is telling us, because we do not possess the capacity of complete surrender and tafweed and become radi bi rida Allah ta'ala, then we shouldn't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to punish. We should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to punish us through, not to correct us through punishment. Very rarely those who are ready for the niqmah and for submission to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no matter what is thrown at them, they accept it with an open heart and with a smile. These are very few and very far in between, that you have people that no matter what happens to them, they submit to the command of Allah and they are happy with it. We see incidents in Ashura, in other places, where Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi's son or brother or other members of the family or close disciples are martyred, then he says that we submit to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We submit, and we are happy with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy. Very rarely we can find people like Ibn Farid al-Masri, the mystical figure, with his famous poem عذب بما شئت غير البعد عنك تجد. It requires huge amount of work on these on his poetry, particularly this one. Throw at me whatever you want, punish me for whatever you want, but not with distancing yourself from me. Why? I cannot bear the distance. We see in Du'a Kumail, for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi talks about how painful that distancing is for somebody who loves Allah dearly. عذب بما شئت غير البعد عنك تجد أوفى محب بما يرضيك مبتهجي. You will find me, you can throw anything at me, not the distancing. If you will find me the best of the lover, that submits to everything and happy and smile to everything that makes you happy. وَخُذْ بَقِيَّةُ مَا أَبْقَيْتَ مِنْ رَمَقٍ. And take, after you have thrown everything at me, remove even the last remnants of life from me, because لا خير في الحب إن أبقى على المهج. Love is complete when you give up everything. There is nothing left. So if there is anything left, remove it from me, because that's how love becomes complete. So in the beginning of this dua, Imam Zain al-Abidin clearly cites or points to us, because we don't have that capacity to be tested with niqam and with punishment and calamities. It's better in our dua to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the right path and grab our hand, so to speak, and move with us to the right path. And particularly in this turbulent journey that we are going to go, but we do not have the power to hold and to stay with niqmah. if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do it in another manner and through ni'am, gentle reminders rather than punishment. Inshallah, we will continue with this theme tomorrow night. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept your prayers and fasting. Please use this opportune month during this holy month to include everyone in your prayers, and particularly those who are in desperate need of prayer, whether they are sick, ill, destitute, or everything else. There are plenty of them around. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.